The way I got hooked on the Yale Russian Chorus is that this senior that I used to know when I was a freshman, he was in the Yale Russian Chorus and he said, "You got to show up." And I came in late and they were singing the beginning of Tebia Poyem by Tchaikovsky. And it just starts with C major, G major, D minor, A minor. It's very simple. And it was so powerful. It just completely changed the way I thought about music. I remember thinking, that's what I want my music to do. Of course, how do you get there?
They were rehearsing far from Central Campus in a room with terrible acoustics. I remember very distinctly walking out of the rehearsal and into the street that was kind of damp after the rain and thinking, this is what I need. This is my home.
The Russian chorus is a strange phenomenon. Here are a bunch of Americans singing Russian songs and going off around the world. And it's a mixture of fraternity, singing group, sort of cultural ambassadors, things like that. People have said, that the Russian chorus was part of a contributing factor to the resolution of the Cold War. Now with this Ukrainian war, everything is turned upside down. The political confrontations continue. But somehow the Russian chorus still sings.
"2022 is a really important year for the chorus. We were planning a tour to Russia, and the war broke out. It really made us revisit why and articulate why we do what we do and what is the nature of what we sing. What is the nature of the chorus? It wasn't really clear, whether the chorus would even survive in its current form because we had lost a year of members because of COVID.
Basses, baritones, tenor.
Russian chorus members have a variety of interests, have a variety of career paths, and some of them are doing this with no singing experience to start with, but just happen to have good voices that we bring together. Some people are interested in Eastern Europe, some people not really at all when they come to the chorus. Some people are just there because they like the sound.
I majored in English and then was active in a number of musical organizations. At the time, I saw myself more as a trombone player.
I do not sight read. I now can kind of sight read sheet music, but back then I certainly couldn't.
I just overheard somebody talking about the chorus in a dining hall, and I was like, well, okay, I'll go try out, sure.
I was a little bit intimidated to start with the application process of auditioning for the Yale Russian Chorus, particularly because I'd never sung before in my life.
It was pretty accidental. So I actually auditioned and was admitted and joined before I had ever heard the chorus.
I remember in high school, in the early 70s, there was an a cappella men's group that came and visited and gave a concert at our high school. It was named the Yale Russian Chorus. And I actually remember one of the songs that they sang. Блаженмуж, Аллилуйя. Иже на совет нечестивый.
Where's the ball? Where's the ball? She never fetches. As Russian immigrant, Russian music is this connection to home for me. I'm very happy where I am now. However, it's very hard to be far from your roots. So every time when I have an opportunity and ability to show and represent my homeland, I'm grabbing this opportunity because it's in my core. My dad told me that I started singing before I started talking, and we tried all kinds of singing. It was folk singing, it was jazz singing, it was pop singing, it was rap. However, I never truly could find the way to express myself in any of those genres. And my dad came to me, he was like, "Do you want to try classical singing?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And I tried it, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's the way."
And when I was 4, I went with my mother to see the ballet by Tchaikovsky, and I saw a harp in the orchestra. it's my life, it's my happiness. I can't live without music. Even one day not playing a harp, it's very challenging for me. Yeah. At Juilliard, there are not a lot of Russian musicians, Russian students, unfortunately, and I miss my home a lot. When I got this concert, I realized it's such a great opportunity for me to really have like memories of my homeland and to share with people what is my culture. And playing Russian music is so much easier for me than other styles of music, like French or German or even American music, because it's something I was born in and something I can understand very easily. I just know how to play it. I don't know how to explain it.
So if we go again immediately to something very lyrical, it'd be a bit too much. So let's talk about the second half. We start with harp, then Paiduli, then first Taneyev, then Tony Ветер. The idea of this project is to invite Russian musicians that are currently based in US and work with a collective that is an American collective, but the specifics of the collective is Russian music. And another very important element of this collective is that it's an a cappella choir, a cappella collective, so they don't really work with instruments.
The entire process for the Trinity concert was relatively short notice. It was within 3 weeks that we were having to put this together. Working with Leo was kind of looking at connections in not just thematically, but motifs and background. And it's very experimental. It's very much trying to blend together traditions that in Russian music, especially in liturgical music, tend not to be blended.
The entire Russian music is sort of, in a way, built on these two primary elements, Orthodox Church and folk music. And so this is basically the dialogue we're trying to create in between the genres.
When we're talking about the differences between Russian and European music, the idea is the same. It's the church music meets folklore, and then they kind of merge. However, in Russian Orthodox tradition, the use of instruments was strictly prohibited, since it was considered to be something from, Satan.
There's always been an antagonism, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker, between folk music and classical music. And what the Yale Russian Chorus sort of did is collapsed that boundary. The way that it was actually done by the Don Cossack Choir, by some of the really interesting singing groups in the late imperial period that had a folk sound but sang classical music and church music, but in a way that it really sounds kind of raw and rough, by people who might be good singers, but they don't really read music, so they're learning by ear. And that sound is actually very rare.
The chorus started off basically as a group of people who were interested in Russian things, European culture in general in a way, and in singing this music. Dennis started the chorus in '53. He had recently emigrated through Poland and then Austria, and then he got admitted to the Yale Music School as a pianist. So he was a serious musician, and he knew his Russian, and he was raised in a very musical family in Latvia. The chorus started as an outshoot of the Yale Russian Club, which had been a fairly staid university student club that invited speakers in who would talk about the economy or political science or Dostoevsky or things like that. But one time they brought in Dennis to talk about singing, and Dennis brought some music and some vodka. Charisma has a lot of appeal. When you're looking for, as a young person, looking for direction, looking for Who could you model your life on? Dennis provided a lot of that. And it became a kind of fraternity.
We're one continuous group. We're one continuous tradition. Yes, every year it changes a little bit, and yes, every year it has different directions, but fundamentally it's a core, same tradition. Its mission is living, a tradition rather than just kind of understanding it. I think that actually is at the core of what the chorus is about.
Tradition is about the essence of what it means to be performing, to be making art, to be saying prayer. Depends on what kind of tradition we're talking about. We always should think about what is the essence of what we're doing.
All right, why don't we just do the hoo-hoo-hoo, just baritones right now, just to get the sound nice.
1, 2, 3, 4, and. Tradition is that without referring to the reality we exist in right now. And so we decided to have a piece, a contemporary arrangement that was actually specifically commissioned for this concert of the Kukushechka, which is actually sort of a combination of a folk song and an Orthodox song.
American singing groups tend usually to go by the book, you sing what's on the page. Dennis said, it's on the page, but you have to think what it is you're trying to convey. He believed that what we have to do as a chorus is sing the music authentically. And we didn't really know ourselves what authentic was. He was our only source of authentic, right? It's beyond the notes, we have to create an atmosphere so that people, the audience, get some idea of what it is to live a Russian, experience.
Tradition is about keeping the essence. It's not about technical repetition, because technical repetition does not bring anything rather than make you do a physical workout.
When I was in the chorus, there was a group that we sort of characterized as the shirt rippers, meaning they were the ones who go for emotion, and then there were the more academic sorts. So there was a tension between them and some of the earlier members who felt that we were getting too academic.
The opposing point of view in this conflict rests on a fundamentally different vision of man. In this system, the value of individual man diminishes sharply, and the state is all important. The state will run his life for him, his political life, his business life, his social life.
Being part of the chorus was always would kind of require a double take, because I mean back in the Soviet era, you know, people would think, well, okay, are you a communist? Is that why you're singing this stuff?
These are the contrasting points of view between the major antagonists in the conflict which has become known over the last decade as the Cold War.
We were all afraid of war. The modern war was so catastrophic with all those nuclear rockets and bombers and so on that we knew that would be the end of civilization. One of the reasons that some of us, at least, were studying Russian was to try to get a better picture of what's really going on, you know, and that's why these tours and so on were very important for us. This is the student club in Leningrad. Gregory Burnside, Russian Chorus of Yale University under Gregory Burnside. This goes back to 1984. This is another concert from the 2004 tour in Petersburg, where we sang in a small palace there along the river. Here's a German concert in Erlangen in Germany. So it's not a very picturesque thing, but we sing, there it mentions we sing Negro spirituals, right? So this is the first group to go to Russia in 1958. Dennis is here on the left, and he's looking very chipper. And one of the things we wanted to do was to present a human face of America to Russians, and coming back, present the human face of Russia to Americans, right? We were the only chance that these people had to talk with someone from the West. And for many cases, we were the first Americans they'd ever seen. The first 3 years, 58, 59, 60, we went as tourists. We did not go as official performers. We did not go as a performing group. So we sang these spontaneous, informal concerts in squares or wherever we were, on the beach or in a park. And there would be immense crowds that would be attracted, and we would talk. And then by 1960, where the Soviets were a little bit onto our game, a number of the people we had talked to just disappeared. One person we asked about it said, well, he's had a little bit of trouble with the police. And we realized, okay, these guys are playing hardball.
Probably about 2015 or 16, I started working on what we call a short history of the chorus. When I started researching it and I found out how closely connected the chorus was to so many Cold War landmark dates, they were in the spots where history was being made.
On the 62 tour, the chorus ended up in Berlin. The day before we arrived, 2 Germans tried to get over the wall near Checkpoint Charlie, and the first one makes it, but the second one stumbles on top of the wall and gets shot by the East German Guards.
The chorus was asked by Mayor Willy Brandt to come and sing at the Berlin Wall just days after this man was shot.
So Dennis went to a bookstore, a music store, and got a hold of Mozart's Ave Verum. And the copy that he got was in German, not in Latin. And they went to the wall, and there was a microphone and a few flowers. And right behind it was the ruin of a building with guards inside and machine guns. He said, it's the first time I ever sang with a machine gun pointed at my neck.
That image is what we're all about. That image explains everything. The wall, the music, but the music can be heard on the other side of the wall.
That's what music does. It just, it bridges the animosities between people.
Whether you're Russian, whether you're Georgian, Japanese, you know, the music can speak to you, even if you don't understand the language.
It's great to be able to just come into a place and instantly connect with the people, you know, whether they're retirees in Florida, whether it's a Korean church in San Francisco. We will often perform for audiences of Eastern European immigrants in the United States or Russian immigrants in the United States, and that will often move them to just suddenly have that little point of access to their former lives.
They express a lot of gratitude for that we have kept this thing alive, you know, while there was this period of estrangement.
The moment when I realized the power of our music was when we took it on the road and took it to the emigre communities. I remember in a particular church concert conducting, and of course I conducted with my back to the audience, but I could see in the eyes of the people I was conducting, in the eyes of the chorus, this intensity and this just connection to the music that I hadn't grasped before. You know, and then I turned around at the end of the concert, and the whole front row was sobbing.
It's like right between the eyes for them, because it's so relevant. And I think one of the great tragedies now is it's becoming relevant again in a kind of different way. That a lot of people who love their country and want to be home in their country don't feel that they can be home in their country.
Our general sentiment was hoping that, okay, they would go into peace talks, they would pull out, this would end.
So we just decided, let's hold off on pretty much doing anything.
There was like a week there where we were having meetings every day into the long hours of the night being like, oh, what's the chorus gonna do now?
There was some discussion actually of changing the name of the chorus. There were people in the chorus and in the alumni who felt quite strongly we needed to change, and people who absolutely rejected that as a possibility.
A couple people left the chorus. Some people did officially, some people just stopped doing it temporarily, or their involvement was cut back a lot. Some people didn't necessarily want to perform with us, but still wanted to come to rehearsals.
I know there are a few like opinion pieces published in the Yale Daily News being like that the chorus is, they're supporting Russia by doing this, and they should not, you know, they should stop singing.
if groups like this did not exist, I think the world would be kind of a very sad place if we stopped wanting to interact with other cultures and other people purely because of the current political climate or historical events. Because those are obviously always changing, but I think music is something that remains constant throughout the ages.
If it's not when relations are difficult, when Russia's at war, what would the purpose of this choir be? It's really important when there is tension to show that there's also a way out. There's a way of having dialogues, even if that's just through music.
I think Russian music is one of the more, it seems like it's one of the most approachable music traditions in the world. Music by Tchaikovsky, music by Rachmaninoff, or even music by Stravinsky or Prokofiev, in a lot of cases seems to be very universal, and people seem to understand it despite disagreements and political agenda.
When we meet one another, citizen to citizen, we embrace each other. We're welcomed with open arms, and we don't really have a political message. We have a cultural message and a message of brotherhood and sisterhood.
That's why I love art so much, is because every time I'm being asked about politics, I'm like, I don't know. I'm an arts. It's above. It was created to unite people. It was created to uplift, to open something deeper in people.
This feeling when you give your emotions and energy to public and then you get a feedback from them, you understand that what you're doing is actually really, really great. That's what motivates me a lot, and that's why I'm still playing music.
It's sort of cliche to talk about the power of music. It's for real. It's not a joke. It has that. So, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, just thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you for the American Cultural Center in Moscow for hosting the screening, and we're just really delighted to share this with everyone. And I'll just begin by introducing myself and then pass it on to Gabriel. My name is Ben Stamper. I'm the director of this film, and I'm a filmmaker who I love to create work that really delves into the process of other artists and other art forms, and trying to understand just how things come to be in the creative world, and the mind of those who are bringing forth new work into this world. And so I was really delighted to be able to tell this story of the Yale Russian Chorus and this specific iteration of the chorus. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about myself. And Gabriel, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Gabriel Mesa. I'm a second-year PhD student at Yale, but I joined the chorus in 2018 when I was a freshman. And also, I just wanted to thank Ben in particular for such a beautiful presentation of the chorus's history and the moment that it currently is in. And I did want to maybe move into that the first question, as an introduction to myself. When I joined the chorus in 2018, I knew nothing of, really just, one class in music theory in high school. I sang in high school choir. I enjoyed music, but I enjoyed rock music more than anything classical. And I actually auditioned for the Yale Russian Chorus because of this random poster up in a Yale dorm that said "Join the Yale Russian Chorus," and it was this double-headed eagle, and I was like, what is this strange poster that looks nothing like anything else. I didn't love a cappella, but I came in, and once I heard the music for the first time at the first concert, I was hooked. So I came into the audition, and I sang Bon Jovi's "Dead or Alive," and it was a journey starting there that led me to eventually take the music a lot more seriously. And especially after COVID, when the choir was really struggling to recruit, I decided to step up and become musical director. And again, with no conducting experience, and the whole thing for me was a lot of learning, but it's also what made me fall in love with it in the first place.
Yeah, Gabriel, I think it's important for the audience to know that it was a very sad day in the editing room when we couldn't find your audition tape. I really wanted to include that in the film, the Bon Jovi audition tape. But yeah, my connection to or what drew me initially to tell the story of the Yale Russian Chorus in this current iteration is that a lot of this music that is in the film is something that me and my family sing every week. And we're part of an Orthodox church near where we live, and so this music is very dear to me, and I think I learned so much in the making of the film about the roots of a lot of these compositions, and they didn't just sort of appear out of thin air. This merging of folk music and church music, and how that was something that I really was so excited to explore in talking to you, Gabriel, and talking to Stepan and Harold and Daniel and everybody in the chorus. Just the wealth of knowledge about what it is that they're singing, and what it is that I'm singing in my own parish, and that, to me, it was a very special project because of that personal connection.
That was great to find out too, Ben, that you sing in, or you play in a rock band as well, right?
Yeah. We that was my musical background, and yeah, certainly my wife and I for many years toured and recorded together. That's what brought us together. And I think it really speaks to a theme that was kept coming up in the interviews, in the creation of this film, was this idea of music being a bridge between disparate cultures, a bridge between people who may not necessarily find themselves in the same room, so to speak. And I think that that's just something that I could talk about all day, is just the enormous power of music to draw people together and to find commonality, where in a surprising way, over this beautiful art form. There's a question that's posed: how did your background in both music and visual art shape the way you approach this documentary? Yeah, it's interesting. I have a kind of a non-linear background, or path towards filmmaking. I started out as a painter, and that's really that awoke my creativity as a person, when I was in middle school, high school. My mom introduced me to oil painting, and it was through that experience of painting with her. She's also an artist, and learning how to observe the world, not just see the world, not just look at the world, but see the world. And so painting was really my first passion, and music came a little bit later. And it was the merging of those two loves that drew me to filmmaking. And so I think that in terms of how I approach this film, it really, or how I approach any film, is just this idea of leaning into, why an image, why a moving image is compelling. What leads us to, a composition or a frame, or an image that goes beyond words, that goes beyond just sort of the obvious subject matter. And I think I always love trying to capture music visually, and trying to capture the essence of how something sounds visually. And so that's just a wonderful part of making a film, is trying to not just illustrate through the visuals, but to complement what you're hearing. And so when you're making a film about something musical, that's a really exciting relationship that you get to explore, about the image and the sound in a really special way. And I think that that's why we decided to incorporate these sort of backstories of the three musicians, to help complement the strong musical underlying soundtrack of the film. And that really was like because the Yale Russian Chorus is primarily a cappella group. That seemed like an interesting place to start, in terms of making a film and making a story, building a story out. Is that there's a film could be made about this chorus in any of the 70 years that it's been in existence, but why now? Why this iteration? And I think that this concert with these three musicians provided a really excellent opportunity to explore this unique performance, where you have an a cappella group joining and collaborating with these Russian musicians, and creating something really new and really beautiful.
And if I can add to your visual storytelling here, I think that probably my favorite part of the entire documentary, in terms of the edits, is the paiduli, portion, where we go from one. I can't help but smile every time I look at that. When we go from one, phrase or a couple measures of Vaiduli to the next, but they keep speeding up, but they're all different eras of the Russian chorus, all different concerts, different sizes, small ones, big ones, anniversary concerts, concerts abroad. And I think obviously it shows the sort of not only the variety of environments where we perform this music, but also that this is something that is a living tradition. And obviously the theme of the documentary, but also I think, thematically important for the concert in the spring, because when Leo and I put together the set list, the idea was also to make not just a bridge between American and Russian music, or American culture and Russian culture, but to be able to bridge, internally, the folklore, the folk music and liturgical music, instrumental music, and a cappella music, which I think the composition by Olga Shaidulina really, encapsulated, in which we had everyone playing together. But it was, I think, an ambitious attempt to try to do this, but to show most importantly, I think that we can keep working within this tradition, and then it's not just something that you will learn about in either music theory or the history of music, or in some sort of archive, right? It's something that we can participate in today.
I'm curious, Gabriel, how in your performing of this music, how the different audiences react differently. Different audiences from different backgrounds that you perform for, or that hear the recordings, how they react differently, according to where they're coming from.
I think I'd say most of the American audience that's never heard this music before is kind of the easiest category to address, because for example, my parents, they start hearing this like, that was beautiful, but what was that? I've never heard music like that before. A similar reason why I joined. But I think, and I think Aaron Shore touched upon this in the documentary really well. What was really moving and keeps, I think, people hooked once they join the chorus and go on tour, is to see a lot of the emigre communities and how they react to the music being sung. Because I remember, whether it's in Russia or outside, oftentimes when we're singing in Florida or California, it's some of the communities feel like you can trace, the emigre communities all the way back to 1917. For example, we were singing in 2023 in California, for Rachmaninoff's the anniversary of his death. We happened to have a concert at a church in Los Angeles, which he actually went to, and we were asked to sing, on the spot, Viechnaya Pamyat, eternal memory, and this sort of, I would say, spontaneous, but also connected feeling of the chorus and chorus members when they get into those sorts of communities is something that you don't really feel in other performance contexts that I've seen.
So you spoke about what initially drew you to the chorus, being, seeing this poster and just it was on a whim, and then you experienced the music itself and you fell in love with it. But being a not only a member but the director, musical director of the chorus, what do you think that draw is for other people, for other students, and what keeps them coming back to this music?
So there's definitely what I mentioned before, but another thing that we try to do is create this is also a Yale club. It's an undergraduate, and some graduate students obviously have always been a part of the chorus, but it is a club at a university. So it's going to also serve a social function. And I think that especially when, when students are touring, but also at rehearsals, we try to make this, a brotherhood experience, and something where people are always at the same time as they are feeling singing the music, that they also feel this sense of camaraderie. We like to have fun. We give toasts before every concert, which is one of those sort of Russian chorus traditions that goes back a really long way. We sometimes give toasts at rehearsals. I've brought, this was something to encourage people to come to rehearsals during COVID. Well, not during COVID, but a little bit afterwards. I started to bring back traditions of, I brought a bottle of vodka to rehearsals. Not everyone was drinking the vodka, but the idea was, if you have something profound to say, it's got to be a really good toast. Bring a beautiful anecdote or a fun story, then interrupt the rehearsal and give the toast. Just to have this sense of artistry and camaraderie at the same time. So I think, at the end of the day, people are also just friends in the chorus as well.
Yeah, I really love what Stepan said when he first joined the chorus and he entered this room. The line he said was, he entered a room with terrible acoustics, and that feels like a real quite a metaphor, I think, for the power of art to transcend circumstances, and as was mentioned in the film, transcend political situations, or where we find ourselves in any given era, and why the chorus has lasted this long. And so, yeah, it reminds me of what you're saying. Reminds me of what Stepan said about, this room with terrible acoustics, and yet something profound was happening. Something transcendent was taking place. There was a sound that transcended the circumstances, and I love that.
I think you have a question about, which related, I think, to this, but what message or feeling do you hope audiences would take away from Traditsiya?
Yeah, I think it does relate to that. It does relate to the idea that whatever life throws at you, art will find a way. Art will find a way to exist and to help us ask the right questions. I really am a firm believer that art doesn't have a mandate to give any answers, but it does have a mandate to ask questions. And I think as soon as it starts giving answers, then it's propaganda or activism, but I think that we have a responsibility to search for the right questions, and I think that will, I'm in my very limited exposure to the Yale Russian Chorus and speaking with its members in the making of this film, I was just struck again and again with that thought, that art will find a way, and it will. That there's great hope in that, that in here's an organization of artistic pursuit that began, its genesis was in the Cold War. That's how it began, and lasted all through the Cold War and is still going today, and that should just give us all tremendous hope. That it's not about having the perfect acoustics in the room. It's not about having the perfect conditions, but if you want it bad enough, then you can keep creating. And that really inspired me personally, and I hope that just a little slice of that can be transmitted through this documentary.
Ben, just related to what you're saying, I think just a funny story when we performed in 2019 at the Trinity Labra in Sergeyev Posad, we we sang a piece. I mean, this is a. I mean, everyone in the monastery is very familiar with this kind of liturgical music. So we sang, and it was and at the end of it, it was. I mean, I think it was a great concert, and they really enjoyed it. But there was a afterwards, our host came up to us and thanked us and said, barring a few technical mistakes, it was a wonderful concert. I think I love that sort of directness, but I think, but I think that if it were perfect and we were a professional choir, then it wouldn't be the same thing, and it wouldn't serve that artistic purpose because it would just become about the technicalities. And not to say that there isn't something to be pursued in that sense, but it's those little mistakes that actually let you open up the space for a different kind of understanding, not a mechanistic one, like a propagandistic one, like you said.
Yeah. It reminds me of this. My wife is an author and illustrator, and she just finished a book illustrating about Persian rugs and the creation of Persian rugs, and there's in every Persian rug there's a Persian flaw, and many art forms around the world have this same concept of embedding a flaw within the work. In the Persian tradition, it's because it's the idea that only God is perfect, and so anything that we make that is sort of a subset of creation should, we should have the humility to embed the flaw. But it's that same idea that the Yale Russian Chorus serves this it has a dual purpose, to activate this tradition and make it living and breathing and not a static thing, but also it is a cultural institution as well that bridges these disparate communities, and you have that tension of both.
And I think part of that cultural tradition too, or that cultural tension, I think is just now this conversation is reminding me of some things that I read last year in a class about in Russian literature class, but it's about sort of Russian formalist or artistic theory. But there's this term ostranение, which is like a sort of estrangement or separation, and I think that what we kind of do as a chorus is not necessarily this sort of estrangement just in the imperfection, but also the people who are singing is not who you would expect to be singing, right? Either because you're Americans singing, Russian music, or people who sing Russian music, except you're all Americans who don't have any Russian background except for a few of you, right? So that sort of dissonance already puts people in a place where I think they're open to learning in different ways.
Yeah. I noticed a question come in about the women members of the chorus, and when the chorus began accepting women members, or how did that come about?
That came about in the 90s. So I think the chorus, ever since I think the mid 90s, the chorus started accepting women. It always sort of was within the parameters of a TTBB chorus. So I think we've been really, I think, blessed to have so many women want to be members. It's actually been great for the social environment too. I think it's especially allows us to do some great songs too that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, because there's just something especially for some of the folk songs particular to women's voices, right? Because something particular to men's voices, like obviously you can tell that from some of the big footage, but I think what the only thing that, the only limitation on that is essentially, we just don't want it to really ever become an SATB chorus. I think because that would change the nature of it. Because a lot of this music, that we're singing, that comes out of the Don Cossack tradition, comes out of the late imperial, men's choruses. That repertoire is made for a TTBB chorus, so that we will definitely be keeping. But we've had women members since the 90s. And actually more women members audition sometimes than men, so we don't really have to try to get more women to join.
How does that, as a conductor, does that change the way that you conduct, or the way that you organize the music, or make what selections you make, or is it the same?
In terms of soloists, definitely, right. But I think that generally it's less of a composition. It does affect composition, but it also affects just voice training, which I think we do a good bit of. And obviously that's different for women who are trying to sing lower in the register than trying to get men to sing higher. But which can be a very different experience. But there are, I think, unfortunately, sometimes it's just impossible for someone who really want to join the chorus to hit the sort of notes that that we need for the tenors. But some of them are surprisingly comfortable in a really low range that I'm actually it's always impressive. Have a better range than most of the guys. So.
Right. Yeah. I'm sadly just a baritone. I can't hit the high notes or the lowest notes. So I envy that tremendously. There's a question for you, Gabriel, about what is it about Russian music that allows it to serve as a bridge between U.S. and Russia, and leading into that question, I just want to communicate to everyone who saw the film that there is just hours and hours and hours of incredible stories that from these interviews that I wasn't able to include in the film, and a lot of it centered around that idea of this question of what it is that is unique about the Russian music that is able to bridge this gap. And that was a difficult part of the editing process, was not including all of the incredible anecdotes and stories of the tours in the Soviet Union and then later in Russia, and that really spoke to this question. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Gabriel, on this.
Yeah, so I think beyond sort of the obvious, American singing Russian music part of it, right? Is there something unique about Russian music that it can be more transcendent, or fulfill a certain role that we're looking to fill in terms of opening bridges, right? I think that there is, because it is one of those. It is one of the choral traditions that's so deep and highly developed as a result of its history, that where I think other traditions other musical traditions around the world lean a lot more into the instrumental, but the musicality you can get from this particular tradition of especially around the time of the revolution, that the Don Cossack choir comes to the U.S. and you get this very unique but also very storied and musically interesting music that also fits onto a cappella groups, right? So I mean, you're already at a university where people are trying to join a cappella groups, and here's a tradition that really embraces that. So I think in some sense it picked up because it was an alternative. Well, one, because people were interested in doing Russian history, Russian culture, right, in the 50s at Yale, but also because, there was already a huge tradition of a cappella music, right? It wasn't like picking up some random new instrument that they didn't know how to play. And there's something about voice that I think is particularly conducive to sharing experience. If you've never sung in a chorus, obviously Ben, you've sung with people, but anyone who's watching has never sung in a chorus. I think there really is something special to that you can't really recreate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, given with the fact that I think you may have said this, but it didn't end up in the film, that all of this music is either about love or death. So it's very universal, and it's that the what you're singing, the content of what you're singing, is certainly something that everyone can relate to.
It's a Woody Allen movie, Love and Death.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a question about your sort of choosing the set list of this particular concert that was highlighted in the film.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see, what your so I'll answer that first, but I also wanted to see, Ben, what you thought of how it all came out at the end, and whether that sort of bridge you think worked. But what the bridge that we were trying to make when Leo and I put the set list together was to try to put folk songs that were in conversation with some of the most talented composers of late 19th and 20th century, right? Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. You heard Leo playing that during the documentary, same motifs, right? And I think one example, if you just to see what I'm talking about outside of this context, right? So I mean, Tchaikovsky uses this in 1812 overture, right? At the end, he's putting in all this sort of all the French motifs, right? The Marseillaise, he's at the beginning, but at the end he puts in the victory finally in Borodino, the Bože Tsarya Achrani at the end, which is a choral composition. Da, 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 right at the end. But that's a sort of those motifs that we're trying to draw out, right? Inspiration that we're trying to draw out. That one's obviously a lot more deliberate. But can we see a connection between these two media that generally, other than a few exceptions, don't, this choral folk tradition and this liturgical or composed instrumental one that don't really get drawn, put together in other contexts.
Right. Yeah. I love. There's one moment where Leo is playing a motif on the piano, just in solo, just by himself, and where it's this hymn that I'm very familiar with, but it's in this other form, being played on the piano with no voices, but hearing that motif, and it was just very haunting to hear that kind of wafting through the room, during the performance, and it was very different, and exciting when it was suddenly not set to voice, but set to the piano. That was really, it did something different. It made me listen closer to the actual intervals that were happening, and that was really exciting to me. And then that happened a few times during the concert, of hearing something that's familiar but in a completely different context, different arrangement that makes you lean in.
You have a question about when directing a music documentary, how do you balance the amount of performance footage and interview footage that you use? So what is the difference between making something like this and a more traditional concert film from a directorial standpoint?
Yeah, great question. There was a earlier, in earlier iterations of the documentary, I realized, oh my goodness, I don't have any full songs represented in the film, because I was so it was much more heavy on the interview side, because what everyone was saying was so captivating to me and interesting to hear about the artistic process. And
But
so
you had already heard it.
yeah,
So-
I had to really reel it back and say, wait a minute, like this, we need to at least have a few musical offerings in their entirety. And so I added them back in, and yeah, so there is a balance, because you're not, when you're watching something like this, you're not sitting down to a concert. You know, that's not the purpose of the film. The film is to compress and condense an experience and interweave it with backstory and context, and it's meant to sort of expand the experience of just a concert, because the conceit is that you can never recreate a live concert performance. Like, even, you know, a faithful recording of it is not going to do it justice, because there's nothing like a live performance. It's singular. And so it's important to really make sure that you don't try to just reproduce it, because it will invariably fall short of being in the room with and hearing acoustically these voices and this instrumentation. So yeah, that's sort of I don't know if that fully answers the question, but yeah, it's a balancing act of just trying to convey something new. You know,
One thing I really liked about what you did and some of the choices you made is that, you know, there were a few songs I remember that it seemed like you played almost the entirety of. There are a few pieces that because I mean some of them I think were good. You know, you did snippets, right, where they were relevant. But is that something you did deliberately, or how did that sort of come?
Yeah, I did feel like there was a few points in the film where it was important for the audience to just be able to the viewer to be able to settle into the entirety of a piece. You know, almost like a breather. You know, you don't. Too much talking is, when you're talking about something like music, too much talking can kind of kill the vibe and be a hindrance to what you're actually trying to communicate. So yeah, those full pieces I think served as more of a chance to rest in the music and rest in what everyone was expressing through words.
I really love that. That was definitely something you don't really see all the time in
Yeah.
music documentaries.
Yeah, for sure. There's a question about how this project fits into the sort of larger body of my work, and I think, as I mentioned in the introduction, is just that I do love to create work about other artists and exploring their process. So it does fit into a larger body of work that I've been making, that does highlight different art forms, and yeah, I hope to continue creating work to explore the artistic process from a lot of different angles.
One question I'm seeing here is, you know, looking back, do you see the chorus more as a cultural exchange initiative or as an artistic one that has positive effects in bringing Americans and Russians together? And I guess I want to I think we've hit a lot on the art part, but just to address the cultural exchange, I think, you know, cultural exchange is one of those terms that almost makes me like, you know, a little bit cringe a little bit, even though it's not, you know, I know what it's trying to say, but it's one of those words that can be very easily, you know, just like in any, you know, abstract word, right? It's what does that mean? I think it almost takes away from the humanity of it a little bit, because I think what we're doing is we are a group of, you know, yes, you can see this as a sort of a project of cultural exchange, right? But then, you know, the mission's a little bit, you know, becomes something that you can contest, right? But I think that what we are trying to do, you know, beyond that is to create human connections. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, like, no matter, you know, cultures are not made up of rules or just, you know, signifiers and, you know, foods and things like that, right? cultures are living. And I think that what we want to do is, I think definitely in a sense artistic, but also just sharing that tradition, both because we're sharing in it, but also sharing it with others. And I don't see really, I think one of the things is you have to take on faith that that's going to have positive effects, because if you're aiming to bridge gaps between people, I don't know, it's not it's kind of hard to see where that goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. There's a comment that came in about a former conductor of the choir that I didn't meet in the process of making this film, but I'm curious if you know about Gregory Burnside, who conducted the Yale Russian Chorus between the years of 1982 and 1984. So he wasn't able to join this screening, but we'll certainly make sure he sees the film, and he just wanted to pass on his greetings to everybody in the room, and so I look forward to getting connected to him. But Gabriel, have you come across his work in conducting the chorus?
I've come across his work in some of the scores that have been passed down. I haven't met him personally, but I do know of him. I think that he's probably the chorus's 5th director. But there's, ever since, for a long time, Dennis was running the chorus, right? This is for over 10 years. I think, I'm not sure, it might have been like 16 years that he's running the chorus. And it's at that moment, and this kind of relates to a question that was also just asked, about what do you attribute the YRC's longevity to? It's that moment where someone, this isn't just one project of one person, right? It's exactly what we're talking about with tradition, right? It's finding someone else who shares in a similar passion, and I think that that's what has continued both in the YRC's membership, but also its leadership throughout, but basically since its founding. And so we've had student conductors essentially for most of our history, which again it does make us oftentimes less professional than the Yale Glee Club or other professional choirs, but it's also, I think, one of the things that keeps us going for so long.
Wonderful. Well, we have just the last question that I suppose we should both answer, which is what do we hope that the lasting impact of this film will be? So, Gabriel, maybe go ahead and give a shot at that, and then I'll close.
Yeah, absolutely. I think thank you, Ben, again for this, putting this together in this way. I think that oftentimes it takes what this film, I think, does is take what existed and what exists in the chorus and articulate it in a way that people can actually understand. Because when I explain, when I explain to my parents or friends, who have not heard what we do or not seen what we do, they're always like, "What?" Like they're so confused. Why would you go and sing this music? Like what, why Russian music? Why why all these other languages that you're singing in? Why what? It's not a sort of judgmental question. It's just a complete I don't understand this. And what I think the film does, and I think also I hope for not just American audiences but for Russian audiences as well, show why because we get just as many questions, if not more, from Russian audiences why Americans sing this music at Yale University students, and this film I think does a great job of articulating where those passions lie, where those beliefs lie, in everyone who joins the chorus. And I think you got a good sort of smattering of perspectives on that, but there's also something that unites it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that hope that's something that would be transmitted, and the lasting impact of this film would be just that. But also, I think for me, it's really important to, I would hope that maybe this film could encourage curiosity. And I think that there's been as of late, like a sort of a tampering down of and a delegitimizing of curiosity, whether it's, you know, from many different places and sources. And I think it's just so much what it means to be human is to be curious. And so this idea of Yale students, some with who are Russian, some who have no connection to Russia whatsoever, joining together in this effort to carry forward this tradition, this incredible tradition of Russian music. I think that's just, that in itself is absolutely a wonderful testament to just the power of curiosity and what drives us forward as humans and keeps us creating. And so I hope that it can help, you know, promote curiosity among everyone. That would be my hope. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and I really hope that you've enjoyed the film. And if you haven't been exposed to the Yale Russian Chorus, please, we really encourage you to do further listening and to be able to see any performances that they do, or see all the many recordings that they have on Spotify and on their website. And Gabriel, maybe you could just direct people towards how they can hear more of the Yale Russian Chorus.
Yeah, so we're on Spotify, but we're also, probably the best place to listen to us is on YouTube. The Yale Russian Chorus Alumni Association is our main YouTube channel, because the alumni are such a big part of what we do. And you know, when we come together for the big choruses, that's the whole group. So it's well maintained. It has pretty much everything we've ever sung that's digitized, you know, coming out almost weekly, as it gets unearthed and digitized. So Yale Russian Chorus Alumni Association YouTube channel is definitely the best place. And if you want to hear more, I think, about this documentary, there will be, going forward, another talk with Yale Russian Chorus alumni and the musicians who are a part of the concert in the spring as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone.